to the President's live briefing. We have about 118 people registered to join us this afternoon. Just as a reminder, please use the Q&A function to place your questions for the panelists in the chat, and not the raise your hand button, since I won't be able to track that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lemons.
Thank you, Yoshanda. Good afternoon. Welcome to the live briefing. With me today, again, Provost Nwosu, Vice President Rotolo, and joining us also, Vice President for Diversity and Human Resources, Don Ewing-Morgan. So thank you to each of you for being a part of this session. On the update front, just some comments about what we're all reading about what's happening at colleges and universities around the country. That's generating lots of national and local press around mainly the problems these campuses are having, and the way they're a focal point now for spreading of the coronavirus in their communities. And now it looks like, you know, all the hot spots, or most of them, are centered around college campuses and universities. New York State is now requiring the 64 SUNY campuses to report on a daily basis through a database they've set up on cases, and there are, if there are 100 cases or more at one time on a campus, they're having to temporarily close those campuses. So, and there have been a few campuses where that's happened already within the SUNY system. So New York State hasn't been able to be immune from that. And that's obviously a concern, but Cuny, with the approach that we've taken with the term, fortunately has not been a part of that story. And with the way that we are doing the academics mostly online, 98% or more online throughout the university, we're not playing a part, we're not contributing. We're actually, but the way we are contributing, I think, is we're helping to keep New York City safe and to keep the rate of infection very low compared to other parts of the country. So, you know, that is something that has not happened easily. I know that everyone that's in this session and many others have paid a price for that in the different ways that we've needed to work and to study and do all of our business. But clearly that is helping, and that's important. And so thank you for all of that. One of the things that leads to always is a question of, well, what do we think this looks like for the winter and the spring session? And we don't know. We will not know for some time, I think, about that. I'm sure you're following all of the discussions and sometimes the controversy around the development of vaccines and all the different efforts that are underway in different countries, including the US. And it's, you know, that changes every day, and there's really no certainty at all that we're going to have a vaccine by the end of this year. I think we know that's the hope, but until we do, that's going to make the spring term an open question, probably one we're going to be living with throughout the fall. Just a little comment about Zoom, because there have been in these sessions a number of questions through the weeks about Zoom. And as you know, now we have a university-wide Zoom license, so it's possible for individuals to go on, to log on using their Cuny logon to use the Zoom license the university has, which allows for up to 300 participants in a session, and other features. There have been a large number of users, 1,400 across Cuny, 405 here, 280 meetings so far at Lehman. So we're in the hundreds of meetings on Zoom happening every day now of the term. There have been some issues, but let me say, first of all, if you're using still the Lehman Zoom license, that's going to expire on the 12th. So it's important that you shift over and log on and use the Cuny license. You do that by logging on to Cuny first. And just remember that when you log on to Cuny first, you need to use the whole login. So it's your plus that number that's behind there. Over there, plus that number that's behind there, your name. So be sure that you're using the entire login, and then it should work for you. There have been some issues, and those are being actively worked on. I can't give you the details about those, but there have been some logon issues for some faculty members and others logging on to Zoom through the Cuny license. So just be assured that they're working on that. Obviously, that's something that we have to get addressed immediately so that classes can go forward and other meetings that are dependent on Zoom can go forward. With that, I would like to ask Provost Nwosu if there's anything he would like to add by way of update since last week.
Thank you very much, President Lehman, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to provide 4 key updates from academic affairs. One of the questions that I've been asked is whether we will be conducting faculty searches for this upcoming academic year in light of the success we've had with the current academic year, searches that began actually last year. And so I want to just speak very briefly about questions around those. And typically around this time each year, the Provost Office works with HR and the Budget Office to conduct an inventory of available faculty lines. And these are usually, when this is done, these are usually replacement lines that come from faculty retirements, or in some cases when a faculty member resigns and moves on to another institution. So it's part of our normal activity each year. In the recent past, the President has approved new tenure track lines based on enrollment growth. And last year, we also added some new lines that emerged because of efficiencies we put in place from our strategic growth and investment plan. What I like to say is that we will continue this process of inventory just to give us a sense of where we are with possible lines that may be available. However, and I want to just underscore this, however, because of where we are with our budget situation, the ambiguity around our budget situation, and VP Rotolo can speak to this at some point today, we will pause the search process for AY 21-22 for now. And that's important to keep in mind. As everyone knows, we did make huge progress from the searches we just completed for AY 2021. We began that search process in AY 19-20, and those searches actually involved 26 faculty lines, 16 were replacement lines, 5 from enrollment growth, and there was another 5 that came from the efficiencies we generated. As folks might recall, by the time we had the hiring freeze in April, we had 17 successful hires across 13 of our departments in 4 of our schools, as well as a library. So we made some progress in that regard. But even with the freeze, we continued the remaining searches, which were at that time at different phases of the process. And then we actually had to use the guidelines provided by Cuny, and guidelines we also established within our college to complete that process. And we made decisions. Based on those decisions, we did make submissions to the Cuny Vacancy Review Board. That college process that we have for looking at hiring requests that included also administrative searches, that process will continue, and VP Morgan can speak to that this afternoon. On a final note in terms of this update, at the start of the fall semester, I had mentioned that the president and I were very fortunate to welcome 26 new faculty at the new faculty orientation that took place in the later part of August. And the diversity of that, of this current class of faculty we hired is worth noting again. I've mentioned that in one of our last briefings, but I thought it was important to underscore that for those who may not have been privy to that information. 9 white faculty, 17 faculty of color, 8 Hispanic, 8 Black, 1 Asian, altogether 13 men and 13 women. And I again want to thank our faculty, our search committees, our chairs, and our deans who worked very hard to get us to this process. The president has talked about spring 2021 reopening. That's the second update that I like to speak about. I did attend the Academic Council meeting yesterday. This is a meeting of chief academic officers within Cuny. And here's where we are on reopening in terms of the discussions that took place at that meeting. You'll recall that in spring 2020, when the Board of Trustees approved the resolution that guided our fall reopening plan, the board also gave the chancellor the ability to extend instructional modality for a mostly virtual learning mode for spring 2021, that's assuming that the COVID crisis continues. And that's what the president was referencing. As we plan for spring, again, recalling one of our last briefings, the president did ask us to continue to think of spring 2021 as similar to what we are doing this semester. Of course, we'll be guided by what the situation presents us as we monitor the health conditions in New York, certainly guided by state requirements and the city requirements, and also Cuny requirements. In the meantime, I have asked our Office of Enrollment Management, and I've also asked our deans to begin to plan for spring schedule along this line. The health and safety of our campus community remains paramount for us as we think through our planning for spring 2021. We will adjust our schedule accordingly as we learn more. We're expecting a guidance memo from Cuny in the next few days, and I'll share that with the campus community once we receive that. One caveat to keep in mind is that as we make these decisions, we will be guided by what the Department of Education tells us, and how they respond will be important for us. As you probably know, the department did grant waivers to institutions across the country to allow us the ability to engage in online learning as we are doing currently. And that waiver extends through the end of the year, that's December 2020. DOE has not given us any waivers beyond that date. And typically when DOE provides that waiver, NICED and middle states, our accrediting agency, tend to fall in line. So we'll be monitoring what DOE tells us. What their role is very important here because of financial aid and because of Title IV as well. So that decision will be very important. As you know, in the past, they have taken steps that were not very helpful. And let's hope that they would indeed take steps that would be mindful of the health situation we're facing in the country. The final 2 updates I would want to provide very quickly is about clinical placement and waivers. This is also one of the discussions that took place at yesterday's Chief Academic Officers meeting. And we've gotten requests from hospitals and health facilities that accept our students for clinical placements. And these requests really are tied to signing liability waivers, having us required to sign liability waivers on behalf of the students. The State Attorney General has weighed in on this and has informed Cuny that we cannot sign liability waivers on behalf of students. So that's not an option for us, and I thought it's important to share that. Cuny is working with elected officials to encourage these hospitals to rethink that requirement. And the final update is on Proctoring platform. This is also another area of interest for our colleagues across the Cuny. There is some movement in finalizing an agreement at the moment by the university, and we expect a university-wide solution by midterm. And Cuny, in fact, at the meeting yesterday, did share with us that the system will not be able to provide licenses for all programs. So each college will have to identify which programs and courses that will need this particular solution in their classes. In the meantime, I'd like to encourage our deans and chairs to think of other options as well whilst we wait for this final agreement on a platform that Cuny is really seriously considering. So President, I'll stop here. Thanks. I think you're on mute, Mr. President.
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you, Provost Nwosu. That's a lot of important information for everyone. One of the concerns that has been expressed a number of times at different levels in the college, which is very understandable one with regard to these clinical rotations, is what will happen and how quickly that can be resolved because of just maintaining academic progress and being able to complete. And I know you agree with me that obviously that's a really big concern that we have. And so we really hope that we can get this resolved in a way that those can go forward. And we will keep everybody informed as soon as we see that there's some new information about that.
That's correct.
So let's turn to Vice President Rotolo. Is there anything that you would like to update us about related to either budget or what's happening on campus?
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you, President Lemons. Yeah, I have a few items. Referring back to Provost Nwosu's mention about the ambiguity of our budget for fiscal year 21, I'd just like to give some updates on that and explain what he meant by that. So we're currently receiving what Cuny is calling emergency funding. We're getting funds on a month-to-month basis to fund our ongoing activities, which includes PS, full-time staff, part-time staff, and OTPS. So we've received funds so far for July, August, and September. And the reason we're just receiving the month-to-month funds is because the Board of Trustees has not been presented or approved a budget for fiscal year 21 for Cuny. So as a result, none of the colleges, none of Cuny has a budget in place. So we're working on month to month. We don't know how long this is going to go on for. But we expect it will probably continue for the next few months. Also, because there's not a budget in place, Cuny has not requested colleges to submit our normal financial plan for both this current fiscal year 21, or our projected spendings for fiscal year 22. And until there is an actual budget in place, we will not be required. So planning becomes a little difficult when we're not able to project what our spending will be or know what our budget will be for the fiscal year. And that's the ambiguity in it. We're kind of in a holding pattern because we don't have a budget allocated, because we don't know what the reduction from the state could potentially be, if there will be a reduction, if there won't be a reduction. So we're really in limbo right now when it comes to our budget. Some things we do know currently is that New York State is withholding 20% of CUNY's overall budget and is withholding 20% of our TAP allocations. And that withholding the TAP allocations actually started in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 20. And going forward, they're holding those 20% of our TAP allocations. So again, we're in a position where we don't have a budget, do not know what our budget is going to be, and are just waiting for both the state and for Cuny at this point. That's the budget update. Unfortunately, I'm sorry I don't have better or more news, but that's where we're at. I've also received some questions about the campus and what we've been doing to ensure that the campus is safe for people coming on board. So the first thing I think I need to let everybody know is that we really didn't shut down the buildings in the way you would think. In other words, normally people, if you leave a building, you shut it down, you turn off systems. We left the buildings, we locked the buildings, but we haven't shut anything down. Our essential workers have been on campus throughout this time, from March on, even though we weren't there. Building systems are being maintained, building systems are being operated. We've been flushing all of the water systems, so we're sure that the buildings are operating at full capacity, are ready for people when people do eventually come back. Because as you know, if you've read our plan, very few people are actually on campus or planning to return to campus. And we will continue to maintain all of the buildings and the systems. All of our maintenance contracts are in place so that all of our systems will be maintained. We've continued to flush all the water systems. Our cooling towers have been treated throughout this period. We've been filing our reports with the Department of Health, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, as we're required to do, and we've been tracking everything that's going on. We also spent a large amount of time having our plant staff disinfect all of the air handling units on campus, changing out all the filters, maximizing the amount of outside air that's coming into the systems. We've followed all of the CDC and New York State requirements for what we must do to prepare our buildings for occupancy, even though they're not occupied. And once we are given the okay to reoccupy, or once we decide to reoccupy, we will again go through this entire process. And that's my report. Thank you. You're muted, President Lemons.
Thank you, Vice President Rotolo, for telling me that and for your report. So there's a question that came in that's a good follow-up to what you discussed around the budget and what you mentioned. A good opportunity to revisit how TAP funding flows and how that affects, because the question is about how does it affect students, the 20% withholding. So maybe you can just give us a little rundown of where those TAP funds go, and you might also, if you feel like it, add a little explanation of why we keep talking about the TAP gap.
Okay, so the way TAP comes to us, if a student is given an award, there's a notice that comes to us. We do not receive those funds right away. Funds are allocated from the state through HESC, HESC, which is the higher education, I forget the rest of it, but that's essentially what TAP is. And those funds go to Cuny first and then are issued to us. A 20% withholding, it's not that they've cut the TAP by 20%, they're just withholding 20% of our award from us. Has no impact whatsoever on the students. The students are still receiving their full award. It's treated that way in both their financial aware documents and in their, through the bursar's office is for their tuition. It's received, it's marked as received, so it has no impact on students. The TAP gap, what the TAP gap essentially is TAP funds up to 12 credits. Many of our students are taking 15 or more credits. Between 10 to 15 or 18 credits, we fund. That means we're self-funding it. We cannot charge for that. The state does not allow us to charge for that. So those credits are essentially free credits to any student taking more than 12 credits. And that's where our TAP gap comes in. And our TAP gap runs about $5 million a year. And without an increase in TAP allocations, this will continue year after year after year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, hopefully, I think that the tap gap issue is one we keep talking about, because that really is that amount of money, 5 to 7 million a year, is really also pretty much the structural deficit that we are trying to deal with in our budget. It would cover that, and so we keep talking with our legislators about it. We keep talking to the executive branch about that. All of Cuny does. This affects SUNY as well. And so I think that the top TAP award right now is 5,000 or just slightly over that, right, Professor Rotolo? So, I mean, Vice President Rotolo. So so our tuition is just a little under 7,000. So students that get a full amount of TAP, we're still not getting, they get the waiver. It doesn't really impact the students, as Vice President Rotolo was explaining. It doesn't have any impact on them. It impacts our budget and the funding that we receive. So it's important, and we know that there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of conversation from the PSC, and we certainly have from the administrative side of Cuny really tried to work with the state legislature and the governor to address this. Of course, in this time of budget crisis, we probably don't have high hopes that that will be addressed, but we can't let that go, because we have to keep reminding them that this is a real gap that we face. It's really impacting our ability to fully staff our offices and to do the things that we need to do to take care of students. So that was a little meander introduced by that question, but it's very much foremost in our minds as we go through the budget process, and eventually we will present a budget to Cuny. And so, you know, we can't help but notice that a big challenge we have when we do that is this gap. So now I'd like to turn to Vice President Ewing-Morgan, and who I've asked to join us today because of the personnel, the hiring situation that we're in. The provost talked about that with regard to faculty. And of course that the hiring freeze that New York State has put in place affects all positions. So I'll just lead off with a few questions that maybe you can respond to, Don. First of all, maybe you can just say a little bit about what the hiring freeze is.
Sure. In mid-April, the Chancellery notified the college presidents, the campus community, that a hiring freeze was being implemented. The purpose is to ensure that the university can stay on solid financial footing and continue to provide core academic and administrative services as we work through these critical budget issues. So a few days later after we see that notification, the chancellor also advised all of the college units that he was going to establish a review process. He created a vacancy review board that could consider exceptions to the hiring freeze. Because as we all know, that even when you're in a hiring freeze, even when you are wrestling with budget issues, the business of the enterprise, the business of the college still continues. We still have to teach, you know, we still have to provide services to students. And so we can't just have a complete halt. So the chancellor advised the schools of certain things. They said they would consider positions, exceptions to the hiring freeze for those positions that affect health and safety, retention, academic excellence, that would ensure that there's no disruption to services, or that will generate income, revenue for the college, for the university. Along with that, the schools were advised to set up their own internal process to consider exceptions to the hiring freeze. And that's what we did at Lehman. We produced some guidelines. 3 committees have been established internally. One committee is the ad hoc committee on academic exceptions to the hiring freeze. This committee considers requests that come in from the deans and the administrative vice presidents in the Division of Academic Affairs and Student Success. Those requests that meet the guidelines, the criteria established by the chancellor. The second committee assesses requests that come in for administrative exceptions. That includes the HEO series of employees. It includes classified titles. They do the same thing. There's criteria that has been established, a rationale, a case has to be made for each position. Each committee independently reviews the requests before them, and then those that they recommend to go forward because the case has been made, they go forward to a third and final vetting committee, and that's Lehman's internal vacancy review committee. All requests have to be vetted by the budget office to ensure that there's funding for them, because the central office has also said what type funding they will consider. HR reviews all requests to confirm that a line is available, or if not at that time, when it will become available. And all that information is then forwarded to the committees that are reviewing the requests. And then the final recommendations go to President Lemons for his review and his determination as to how to proceed, meaning will those requests be sent down to the University Vacancy Review Board, or do they need to be deferred for some reason? As an additional note, the University Vacancy Review Board meets once a week. They are reviewing recommendations, requests from all units of the city university. So sometimes we don't get a response as quickly as we would like, and I understand that that has caused some frustration, particularly as we got closer and closer to the beginning of the academic semester. I apologize. We've all been learning how to negotiate the process, how to work with the central office. And the central office has also apologized to us, saying that they are trying their best to get through all the requests that they receive.
Thank you. That's really helpful background to this whole process, which I think even for those of us that are directly involved in it can sometimes seem pretty complicated and seems like quite a number of steps that are involved, and there are.
Yeah, but we've been trying our best to streamline it because we don't want any processes that are unduly burdensome to the campus community, but we also understand what is being looked for, that it's not business as usual. We can't just proceed with hiring, that we really have to make the business and the financial case for anything that is put forward.
Right. And you know, that last point you made, I think, is so important for all of us to keep in mind, because as much as we would like to be able to return to kind of business as usual thinking, we really can't do that. And even though Vice President Rotolo can't really give us news on the budget, I think that when we really look at it realistically, we know that we're going to be in this kind of a period where we're having to really watch hiring. We're going to be in that for a while. So that's going to be kind of our normal for the next while, probably through this year. And I think we just, as much as we don't want to have to accept that, we do. But the process as I've observed it, I think has been really effective at the college. And I think that one of the things that I've heard in feedback from the Cuny VRB is that they've been getting lots of resubmissions from campuses where there's not a real clear articulation of the reason for why this hire should happen. And we really haven't had that issue with what we submitted. So I think that the process is working well at Lehman College, and I think what we are submitting, we're submitting with the kind of rationale that really needs to be there.
That's correct. That's correct. And so, you know, I appreciate everyone who is doing that, because it's the campus community, it's the chairs working with the deans, it's the directors working with the vice presidents that really understand what the critical needs are. And so they have to be able to communicate that to us for each committee who's reviewing these actions.
Right. So we may get some questions coming in a little later on related to what you've presented to us. Is there anything else that you want to update us on?
Yes, and thank you for asking. Want to talk about a new policy initiative. Most of you, all of you actually should be familiar with the Cuny policy on sexual misconduct. That has been in effect for probably more than 10 years. However, this summer, just a few weeks ago, the Cuny Board of Trustees approved a revised policy on sexual misconduct. The policy was revised to be in compliance with changing legislation and guidance from the federal level. So I encourage each and every one of you to really become familiar with that policy, because it affects faculty, staff, students, and even visitors to the Lehman College campus. The policy is posted to the College Policies webpage, which you can access from the Lehman College homepage. It talks about there are new definitions about what is sexual misconduct, what is sexual harassment. It talks about there's a new procedure to how to investigate and how to adjudicate cases and how to even resolve them. Those of you who are considered responsible employees, meaning that you have an obligation to report any complaint that you become aware of or which is brought to your attention. Those of you who are confidential employees who have a different role in this process. There's some discussion about what your role is. There's information about resources and how to access them and make them available for employees as well as students. So I encourage you to become familiar with that policy. But in addition to that, I'm also asking everyone to become an ally in prevention. So how do you do that? Cuny has an online sexual misconduct prevention program. For employees, that's posted to your Blackboard site under My Organizations. Students who are also required to take this program, they get a notice from the Vice President for Student Affairs, the Dean, and other staff telling them how to access it from their checklist. So everyone, if you take it, you really understand what the policy is, what the laws are, what we're held accountable for, meaning you become an ally in prevention. I'm pleased to report that since January 2020, we've had 755 full and part-time employees to complete eSpark, which is the acronym for the program. However, our goal is 100%, 100 employees to complete the annual training, and to do that by October 1st. So if you started it but didn't complete it, or if you haven't started it, I urge you to do so, and let's see if we can get 100% completion by October 1st. There's also a second mandatory program that for employees, this does not apply to students, but employees are also asked to complete the workplace violence prevention program. That's another online program, and like the sexual harassment one, it takes only about 30 minutes. You can move through it very quickly and still get a lot of information while moving through it. That program is also posted to your Blackboard site. If you have any questions about either one, for employees, they can contact Human Resources. Students should contact the Office of Student Affairs. You know.
Great, thank you.
That's about all. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all very important, and I have to say that those trainings can seem a little pro forma, and they can feel like, well, we're just checking off boxes, but there's a lot of really good information in those trainings, and it is important. It's really something that everybody in the campus community really needs to be aware of and understand how to report, who to report to, where to find information. All these things are really important that we be current on in our understanding.
Yes.
So thank you. So I want to come back to you, Vice President Ewing-Morgan, with a question. I know we discussed this a week or two ago, and there was a question around payroll and checks. And I know that every term we try very hard to make sure that particularly adjunct faculty members are in the system and are paid, but we usually have some issues in one way or another. Could you say anything about that? I don't know what the status right now is. I know today is a payday, but maybe you could say a little bit about where we have been in terms of getting everybody onto the system.
Sure. As you know, the feeling from all of us, whether it's the provost, you, Vice President Rotolo, when people work, they should get paid. So HR has been working very quickly to ensure that all the paperwork that they receive, the EPAFs and other forms, are entered into the system. However, the state deadline, state payroll deadline for having things entered is unforgiving. So if we don't get information in by the deadline date, it may happen that someone may not get a paycheck. Or, for example, this is the payroll period, the first date. I don't know if anyone is not getting a paycheck. I don't have that yet from HR. I can get that information, check with them later. But they have been working, and they even had gotten the central office payroll office to extend early in August, to extend the submission date 2 additional dates to allow them to continue to enter things that were coming in late. And things happen. I mean, we have to add classes at the last minute. Maybe some individuals don't turn their reports in by the deadline date. So we understand things happen, but we will continue to try our best to work with the departments to get the paperwork that's needed so that they can input it and get individuals paid on time. However, if anyone ever has a problem with their paycheck, I encourage you to immediately contact Human Resources so that we can figure out how it can be resolved.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that that's probably there's probably few, hopefully very few, for whom there are issues, but that's really important to know that they need to get in touch with the HR office right away. One of the questions that came in before today's live session was about the timeliness of response from offices like financial aid and some other offices or student serving offices, the Bursar, and about wait times for those. And I'll start off by just saying that we are aware that there have been wait times that are longer than we would like. Those are partly explained by just the different way that we're doing business now, that we have been largely working with staff remotely, and that isn't always the most efficient. It's worked pretty well and it's gotten better, but it isn't always the most efficient. We've also had a limited number of staff. We've had fewer staff in those offices than we would ordinarily have or really would need to have. And so in some cases, we've been able to add to the financial aid office staff, and that hopefully is improving the wait times and decreasing them. But we are aware that those have been issues, and we are working on them. And Vice President Rotolo, I don't know if there's anything more you could add to that, that could, shed a little, excuse me, shed a little more light on that.
I think some of the difference also is, if you go look at the busy times when we were actually open, people would be on campus waiting, and they would be waiting for a long time on campus. I think people expect a quicker response when things are done electronically, but I think some of the wait has actually been similar to it being to what happens on campus. It's a very busy time. A large group of people are coming in at the same time and needing answers or responses or help at the same time. And there's just, there's a limit to the volume that the number of staff can handle at any one given time. So I think that was part of the problem. And the fact of everyone adjusting to this new normal of doing things. But I think at this point, I think we're moving in a very good direction. I think we're caught up. I think things are moving very well at this point. And I think staff has become more comfortable with this way of operating. So I think you'll find in the future, things will run much more smoothly than they had initially.
Thank you. And I think it is really important to acknowledge the efforts on the part of the staff who have worked really hard and put huge effort into taking care of students. And it's been a tough time. It's been very difficult to do this in the kind of transition we've had to make. So I want to thank all the staff who have really tried to make this work. And I guess I also have to include the staff in IT, who I know have also helped, and IT has done a lot to try to streamline processes, to try to reduce wait times. And of course, now in this online environment, all of that is so much more important. But the IT staff and the whole IT team have also really worked hard to take care of students. And we know it's not perfect. We know it hasn't been. We couldn't reasonably expect that it would be, but we certainly intend to make it work for students, because we know that's important.
Mr. President, let me just also add that
sure.
We did a quick analysis of where the bottlenecks might be with vis-a-vis financial aid, and it seemed to be in the area of financial aid verification, and that's what you find across a number of institutions. So what we have been looking at, and we've been also in discussions with Cuny, is exploring a platform or workflow processes that help to minimize that wait time as well. Even as we make progress, and we have made progress with the 2 hires in financial aid we have, we still continue to look at other ways to actually improve the process. We have had discussions with IT, as you mentioned, and QLS is also the other tool that students were actually using when they came physically on campus. And what we're looking at is how we actually can deploy that platform as well through the online space. And so whilst we're engaged in adding staff to this, we're also looking at technology solutions that we could deploy.
Thank you. One of the questions that came in, it's a little bit different area, but it does have to do with taking care of students, and that's around laptops and hotspots. And just a little update on that. We've had over 1,000 loaner laptops out. A number of them have just gone out again this week. And also, I think as of today, a little under 300 hotspots have been mailed out to students. There was a little bit of lag getting those. We received a little over 270 of them from the central administration from a large purchase they made. And there was a delay having those transferred to Lehman College so we could distribute them. That had to do with some software updating that needed to be done on those devices, but those have now gone out. And we also are acquiring more of those so we can hopefully take care of all the student need. There are students who may not have heard yet back. They have applied to get one and haven't heard back yet. They will hear, but they also can get in touch with the help desk to inquire about that. If there's a concern that the application somehow something misfired, it hasn't been recorded, they should definitely do that. But we do have a supply of loaner laptops that are still available to go out to students. And I think that we will have enough hotspots. We knew that we probably were going to need somewhere between 400 to 500. And we are working to come up with that number. And I think we will. So hopefully through this week and in the coming days, we're going to be able to have most students set up with this equipment. I mean, we know that it's an issue. It's an issue all through the Bronx. Access to broadband is very much less in the borough of the Bronx than it is in the other boroughs of New York City. It's almost uniformly less across the whole borough of the Bronx. So that means that many of our students, 60% of them who come from the Bronx, are in that situation probably where their broadband access is not always as good as it really needs to be. So, but students, and if you're aware of students that are having issues, they should definitely reach out and get in contact, because we don't want to have any longer delay than we possibly have to have. We know that it's critical that students be able to get access to all the digital resources that we're using to do this online term at the college. And the there's a question about how students can access them. And if students go onto our website and follow the link that's on the front page, they will quickly find where there's an application for either a loaner laptop or a hotspot. So the application's pretty easy to fill out, and that's monitored constantly. So I think we've gone through most of the questions, or maybe all the questions that have come in or that we got ahead of time. There's one that we haven't responded to yet, which is a really great question. It's a good one to end on, I think. And that question is about what is the senior leadership learning through this period of time? And I love that question, because I think the concern we all have is that we're going through a lot and we are doing a lot. And we would like to think that we're not only just surviving, but we're also picking up things that we can carry with us beyond this period of time that will help us and be useful. And some of the things we've talked about today, the role that IT has played, the things that IT has developed to help continue to streamline student interactions with offices. And that's also true for human resources, the EPAF program that they put together that is really speeding that up, the e-transfer program for transfer students, which has cut really weeks off of the time that's taking to analyze transcripts. So, you know, all of those things that we're doing, some we were doing before the pandemic, many of them though we're doing only now. We really do want to learn from those. We want to carry those forward. One of the things that we are doing as a cabinet is we are actually we've mapped out for the year a series of discussions in different areas about what it is we are learning that we can take forward, that we can try to implement as we go forward. Things that we probably would have wanted to do anyway if they can facilitate student services and streamline processes to reduce those lines that Vice President Rotolo refers to and other kinds of things. We obviously do want to do those. But there are many things that I think we will learn, particularly going through the fall term where we've really planned for this online distance learning term. There are many things that we will learn, and we need to be conscious of trying to think about and note what those are. Again, not just to get through it, but to get through it with benefits that we can carry forward. So thank you for that question. And I think actually that's sort of a task that everybody at the college should take on, is to be noting what are the things that I'm seeing happening that I might not have thought to do, or that somebody else is doing that maybe we wouldn't have thought to do it that way. And, you know, it turns out that it actually works really well, or might even work better than what we've been doing before. So I think we have to just have that mindset this year, because there's so much that we're having to put up with. There are so many big challenges, uncomfortable things, but that's where we can get some silver lining out of this situation that we're in. So I think that there's a question about having the link for laptops and hotspots on the front page of the website. We can think about doing that, but I think if students will just go to that virtual support area, they can find it pretty quickly. But we can think about that if we could make that more accessible to students. So with that, I think we have covered the questions that have come in today. Again, thank you to Provost Nwosu, Vice President Rotolo, Vice President Ewing-Morgan for joining us and adding all this important information. And thanks to everyone for being with us today. And with that, we'll end. Have a great afternoon.